Hello, I want to welcome you all to kind of a special segment we're doing. I'm just doing a one-on-one with Denny Caballero today on the power of our story. Um, we are on the power of our story. We are putting a book together of about 20 to 25 of our protectors' stories. We'll have 25 authors, and Denny Caballero is one of the authors. His story is powerful. It just absolutely moved me to the core. And I'm so grateful that he's so generous with his story because we're going to be talking a lot about what it is like to transition from the military. We know that there's a lot of people that are suffering in silence who have protected our country, and we want to protect our protectors by letting them know that they don't have to suffer in silence. So Denny has a fantastic way of articulating his journey and the insight that he has gleaned while really owning his journey and pressing forward and just doing amazing things. So Denny is actually a mental health advocate. He's the Honor Foundation alumni, so he's gone through that transitioning process. He is a medically retired Green Beret, and he's also the host of Security Halt podcast. So, Denny, thank you so much for having this conversation with me today.
Absolutely, Sarah. Thank you for having me. It's my absolute pleasure. We as Green Berets or honestly all soft professionals, we have this idea that while you're in uniform and even after you get out of uniform, the worst thing you could do is talk about your experience and you got to be a quiet professional. That's our thing. Green Berets, that's our moniker, quiet professionals. You should never hear about our victories, and the only time you'll hear is if something horrible goes wrong. And I think uh we do that so well to a detriment. I know that when I was suffering, I was praying, I was hoping, praying somebody else could see and recognize and would be willing to advocate and talk and pull me out of this, and someone could rescue me.
Mm.
But as I look back and I reflect, we're just all wearing a mask. We're all of us are struggling painfully to keep it together, to stay in ranks. Um, but on the outside, and as I look now and understand, it's like we have to be willing to talk, share our success, share our failure, because that's how we help others. So now in this second chapter of my life, that's what I do. Not only through my own podcast, speaking and doing public speaking engagements, but if I am giving the ability to talk about my journey, I see that as a way to help others and to give hope and give that sense of strength that if I can do it, you can do it, and we can all get out of this. We tend to think that this mental health issue that we're facing is, we look at it in spheres. Well, it's the veteran mental health, active duty mental health, civilians. Like, no, mental health is something we're all struggling with. And if we don't talk about it, if we don't engage with it, we're not going to save anybody. The bracelets aren't going to do it. The t-shirts aren't going to do it. No trinket, no sticker is going to save a life. But
Mm.
if we connect with the most important and most unique human thing that there is, and that's storytelling, if we engage in that, we can help each other heal and we can save more lives. So I'm not joking when I will say that I will travel anywhere if given the opportunity to speak and talk about this, because that's how we change lives.
Mm.
So thank you for giving me the ability to talk with you today, Sarah.
Oh my gosh, Denny, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I feel like what you're doing is you are taking that courageous step in civilian life to show people the different mission, right?
Yeah.
You're taking that out of the quiet professional, which is totally understandable in the right context. Now, what is saving lives and helping people know what is the North Star now in transition and civilian life is exactly what you're doing, is really being open and being so generous with your journey. Why don't we start from your childhood? Let's go where it all
Yeah.
started.
Oh man, that's and it's funny. That's the one thing that a lot of us never talk about. We don't talk about where it started. Um,
Mm.
And I've shared this with you before in our previous talks, that we tend to think that SOF and military personnel are coming from this, background of like the 1950s, the great generation. When we look at the white picket fence, the great family, the great upbringing. But something that I've found in the course of this project, of this endeavor, is I realized, especially within my soft professional cohort, is I found individuals that struggled deeply with a lot of trauma before they ever put their feet into those yellow footprints at Marine Corps training camp, or before they came and went through Fort Benning, before they went to Fort Bragg. They had a lifelong of trauma, and that's where my story begins. I was born in Panama, Central America. I was a young kid during the invasion of Panama. Now, normally, when we look at news right now and we look at civilians trapped in Gaza, and we look at civilians that have been part of, hellish nightmare of war, we understand. A normal everyday American understands, like, wow, that would impact somebody. I never did, because after that, I was brought to this country and subjected to, um, and it's not joking, it's not um hyperbole, it's the reality. I suffered greatly as a child under, the abuse of somebody that was supposed to be a parental figure. The man that married my biological mother and brought us to the United States ended up being a sick, sadistic predator, and we suffered and we endured. And when I look back at my life now and understand why that trauma was just normalized, is because it's what I lived, that's what I went through. That was everything I knew as a kid, was you just went through it. You just survived, and you survived it by keeping quiet, shutting your mouth, and you just endured. So it was just commonplace to be put in situations where your life might be over. And then you washed up and then you went to school, or on the way back from school, and you normalized it. Like, this is just my existence. This is just what I was born to endure. And as I lived that over and over the years, all throughout grade school, all throughout middle school, and then high school, you realize that there's nothing special about me. There's nothing wonderful about me. I'm just somebody's, you know, punching bag. I'm somebody's, you know, tool that they use when they need to release stress. And the reality is, like, there's so many of us that get into this line of work because we desperately wanted a protector. And I didn't know that. I didn't know why I chose that. Um, Looking back all those years, I do understand that, like, you put somebody through so much abuse over and over and give them no hope and no way out. As they develop and mature, if they don't go by the wayside into drugs, into gang, into crime, then they're going to seek out the hardest possible jobs to become a protector, a defender of the weak. And that's what I did. I also saw it as an opportunity to get out of, you know, what I had, what was given in life was absolutely nothing. I didn't have established family. I didn't come from money. I literally graduated high school by the grace of God. I didn't have great and I didn't see the value of it, because when every day you're going home into a warfare and into being abused, who cares what happens at school? There's a way for me to screw around and, find little moments of pleasure and joy. And what I realized in my life, once I broke free from that, which took many years, we're talking about the abusive cycle in my family, was very, very, very hard to break away from. So I ran away from home, and then years later was brought back into it, because I loved my sisters. I deeply loved them. Um, so I went back, and then having to leave and reconcile that as a young man, that just wrecked me. And you don't stop and think about that trauma. You just push it back, just push it away. Um, and as you get older, you realize that, man, these are things that are very intimate, and I don't want to talk about them anymore. I don't want to engage with it. I don't want to bring this up, because as a man, you don't admit those things. You don't admit that you were ever violated in those ways. It's very hard to talk about. So I never sat down with a mental health provider as a young man and talked about those things. Never talked about the amount of times that I thought I was going to die as a child. Never talked about the things I witnessed and endured. And those key events of trauma, not only get locked in the back of your head, but they get locked in your body. And you just understand that pain is just something you push through. You constantly push through it. You just get through it. You endure it. Um, Never had great understanding of emotional intelligence. That just wasn't part of my education. So for years of going through, the only thing that I had, the only thing that I could figure out to do was just store in the back of my mind, keep it locked up, and you don't talk about it. And then in moments of vulnerability, you just drink. The moment where that fragment first appears, or a moment of truth, you're like, oh man, you get through it with dark humor, you get through it with drinking, you get through it with risk, risky behavior. And that's how you learn to cope. And it makes perfect sense why later on in the military, you fit in with everybody else, because everybody else that is around you, for the most part, is dealing with the same things. We just don't know how to talk about it. Um, so yeah, my childhood was not idyllic. My childhood was very painful. Um, and I never had the ability to deal with it because you're just in survival mode. Trauma becomes just your normal everyday. Um, and when it's so bad, you don't even want to admit it. And you think that if it was bad enough, others would intervene. There are no teachers intervening. There's no adults coming to your rescue. So you think, okay, well, maybe it's not bad. Someone would be able to see. And then you reflect back now on hindsight, and you look at all the things you survived, the sexual abuse, being molested, the physical abuse. I came close to death so many times as a small child that I realized, like, wow, like that impacts you. That changes your ability to understand things. Like, life or death isn't something that I experienced in combat. Like, I already had that understanding. Like, you could wake up and it could be your last day. And you're a kid in school, no child deserves that. But I just thought it was normal. Because why else, with my grown adult biological mother sitting there, not risk getting us out of there? And that's something that I struggled with for a long time, understanding that you were in a home with, yeah, this man wasn't your biological father. He's a predator. So, of course, he doesn't have any emotional ties to you. He can do whatever he wants with you and be okay with it. But your own biological parents sitting right there watching it, witnessing to it, and they don't budge. And that was hard for me to reconcile later on in life. It's a very hard thing to deal with. And, you know, I was in my late 30s when I finally got help and I finally talked about it. All that pent up anger, all that pain, all that abuse, never talked about it. Not even with my first wife. So that's a mentality that a lot of us are carrying with us, that there's no room for it. Nobody wants to know about this. Nobody wants to be burdened with this. You just carry your weight and you move on. And that's the wrong idea. I know that now. I know that completely. It's the wrong mentality. Um, no human being can carry the weight of that and survive and thrive happily. No one can. It's humanly impossible. Um, at some point, we all break down. Um, and that's inevitably what happened to me. You come into the military with a bucket that's already filled to the very top. Then you add back-to-back rotations to Iraq. You add failed relationships, failed marriage, death of close friends, more combat in Afghanistan. And you just think that it's normal. I'm not dealing with something that's abnormal. This is normal. Everybody within the left and right of me is fine. They're thriving. They're having families. They're doing, normal everyday American things. Okay. So I should be doing the same thing too. We don't have any coping devices too. We don't have any positive things to do. We just drink, or we work out, or we get addicted to thrill-seeking behavior, and that's okay. You can do all of that, but talk, that's one thing you can't do. Um, and that became part of my life as well, as it does for so many soft professionals. Because again, the culture of talking and getting this at that time wasn't there. You'd hear things, but it was always backed up with jokes and humor and really dark whispers of what people really truly think about those that get help. And I knew early on I didn't want to have that. I didn't want that to be the reason why I lost my career. Um, but in the end, it could have lost. Like I could have lost my life. I was that far gone. That after suffering everything I went through, after my physical, mental, and every issue that I was dealing with was going to cost my career, was going to cost me my career. I realized that I don't want to live. I'd rather check out, as they say, than give up the identity, than give up this career. I mean, looking back, that's a horrible thing. But when you don't have anything, when you came to this country and you were basically abused to the point where you'd rather die as a young kid, it makes it perfectly rational to think that you can't do the one thing you earned. You can never do this anymore. You work so hard to earn this elite status. It will be taken away from you. Of course, I don't want to. What am I going to do? There's nothing of purpose in this life if I can't do this. So it makes perfect sense. I'm going to end my life. I rationalized it. It made perfect sense. And if it wasn't for the hard work of one specific mental health provider, and her name is Michelle, I truly wouldn't be here today. Because after chasing every viable way to stay in my career after my last deployment, after chasing every surgery, after chasing every possible way to put my mind back and combat all the different things I was going through, um, the diagnosis finally came back. They're like, no, you've suffered actual damage to your brain. You have actual issues that you're not going to be able to just walk away from tomorrow. There's no magic wand. There's no magic pill for this. Things are changing and they will change your life forever. And for me, I didn't want that. I didn't want to lose that ability to control. That's the other part, the control aspect. I wanted to dictate how I healed. I wanted to dictate how I was going to be able to stay in this job. And it wasn't in my hands. Mind, body, and spirit were depleted completely. And I had not found faith. I definitely wasn't at that point looking towards anything alternative to being a special force soldier. Green Beret was the only thing that mattered. And it really took that sit down and being honest with Michelle finally and saying, like, hey, I'm not doing this anymore. I can't do it. I have a plan to take my own life. I just need certain things to work themselves out. I was waiting for my wife to go on her deployment. And I thought that was a noble thing to do. That was the other weird thing. And I thought that was actually the greatest thing I could do was check myself out rather than trying to think of an alternative course of action and give myself the hope and believe that I could do anything else besides just being a Green Beret. And luckily, that little bit of vulnerability gave me the chance to attend a treatment center, Lower Ridge Treatment Center, that saved my life. And I don't say that lightly. I greatly believe that if it wasn't for that intervention of going to that treatment center, I would, regardless of the amount of help and where else I would have gone, I truly believe that I would still have followed through with something ridiculous as taking my life.
What I'm curious, so that is thank you so much for being vulnerable. It's just, as a mother of 4 sons, imagining what you went through, imagining being a mother and where possibly your mom was at to Yeah, I can't imagine. So it hurts me as a mother to know that you went through that. It's quite amazing your journey, kind of what the stories that we tell ourselves to suppress certain parts of our life
Yeah.
and enhance maybe another performing part of our life, which you did. You did very well. You performed very well. You put all that energy, and like you said, I mean, you already faced death in childhood. So, how
Yeah.
was it any different in being a Green Beret or um, all the things that you went through was not, you said earlier that being a Green Beret wasn't so hard for you because you already experienced so much in your
Oh,
childhood. Is that
I
correct?
I I tell this all the time. When I went through SEER school, uh, it's challenging. SEER school is challenging, and I don't want it to make it seem like it wasn't, but it was eerily familiar in how easy it was to slip right back into that mentality of what your abuser wants you to be: docile, eyes down, broken. There's no pleasure when you don't scream, when you are submissive, you just look down, try not to catch a beating, try not to wake the bear, try not to irritate. Well, just living and breathing was enough of a reason to catch a beating. And you just go limp. You just wait for it to be over. You disassociate.
Mm,
You just simply wait. And people that never experience that type of violence always, well, why don't you fight back? Why don't you kick and scream and fight back? There's no fighting back. Maybe the first couple weeks, because that's how fast the abuse was normalized within day one of being in this country. Day one, walking in to that disgusting smoke filled trailer, the normalizing began. We were his property. And when you walk into that camp in SEER school, you understand, oh man, flip, get right back into it. It's easy. Take a couple of slaps, take a couple of hits, move on. And I was cognizant and aware enough to understand, like, holy shit, this is exactly what it felt like when I was a kid.
mm,
The ridicule, the mocking, the name calling, the reality set in that you can do this. Like, at some point this ends. I got this. This is gonna be nothing, cakewalk,
mm.
because at some point the training ends. I didn't know that when there's no training when you're a kid.
Yeah.
It came here when I was 6 years old. There's no there's no waiting it out. You're living it. There was early hope. There was early hope that something would happen, that we would get sent back to Panama, that a family member would come out of nowhere, or my biological father would call or mount some sort of like daring rescue. The truth is, no one was coming.
Mm. Wow.
No one was coming to get me. No one was coming to get my sisters. At first it was just a daydreaming when you still had hope.
Mm,
And then by the time we left Florida and moved to Colorado, then this is life. And now I just survive. Take
right.
another year. Take another year. Wait. Um, and that's the reality of it. There was moments in my life as a kid that I reflected back in selection, such as SEER school. That moment where you were sitting there, and when things get hard and it's okay to break down. It's okay to have moments where you're like, man, this sucks. But I never had that ability. You kept your mouth shut. You kept moving forward. You kept dealing and enduring. Um, and that's something that I took with me for the rest of my and because the abuse was normalized, and because I hadn't dealt with my trauma, I always gave everything up to that experience. Oh man, this cakewalk. Thank God I went through that. Those are things I would say. Oh
Mm,
man, I'm successful because I went through this. I'm successful because I went through all that trauma. And yes, I do believe that because I had seen and experienced so much pain in my life, there are moments where a lot of people would quit and I just be like, no, I can break through this. I can persevere. I can go through this. That's not why I was successful. That's not. And for all of us that endured all that through, because I'm not the only one. Like I said, I've talked to so many individuals that had similar stories of trauma and painful childhoods. We give away that power,
Mm.
and we look into the world and say, I'm great because of all this pain. It's like, no, 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 no. You're great because of you. And for a lot of us, we don't get that till years later.
How did you get your power back? I mean, I can imagine too, there's professionally maybe having to go through all that trauma and abuse.
Yeah.
Maybe, okay, you learn how to suppress everything. So professionally, okay, maybe it can help you professionally going through that. Um, I am curious about, if it actually triggered you or you just suppress even more, doing that season 2 with being a Green Beret. But then again, too, like, how much damage that does when you have to continually suppress and not be able to process any of that also. Like, there is a toll, isn't it?
Yeah.
Maybe it enhances your profession to a certain extent, but then at some point, like you said before, it's gonna come out, doesn't it? It
Yeah.
comes out in some way.
It does. You There's a thing that I feel is it's again, this is so unique to our demographic. Um, you put on a mask. The the best attributes of you tell yourself they don't really belong to me. They belong to this version of me. It's not truly me, but I'm gonna be this version in uniform and on deployment. And I didn't reconcile. I didn't get my power and feel like I do now until I went through treatment.
Oh,
Because the Green Beret, the best aspects, the person that was on the team, the person that became a warrant officer, the person that was able to do all those great things, that was a different part of me. That wasn't the person I saw in the mirror. The person I saw in the mirror was a weak, disgusting, horrible human being. Somebody I didn't like look into because I could see all the things I endured
no
and all
compassion,
the
right? Like
no,
what
and that's yeah, absolutely no compassion. No compassion. And God, I love talking about this. We got to come back and we got to hit it up on
gotta hit
compassion,
this
but
one. Yeah.
there was absolutely zero self-compassion.
Mm,
I had self-esteem, and that's what gets you through. And that's what I thought it's the most important thing. Self-esteem is like, fuck you. You're not going to keep me from my goals. I came from nothing. I will get to where I want to go. My self-esteem was there. Like, you can do this. But then if you fail something, if something goes wrong, it was those long nights of drinking and self-destruction, and then somehow pulling yourself out of it. And it would always lead. The only way you pull yourself out of it is if you accomplish something, if you do something of worth or of value, or have a great deployment, or have a great chase, do something where it's external. Like, yeah, look at this. I achieved. I went to this school, and I can trace it back to the moment where that began, and I was first coming onto a team.
mm.
The first big moment of failure that I had on a team was when my first marriage imploded. And
Mm,
that's at the core of you as a man. How does somebody how look at you, you worthless piece of shit. Somebody walked away from you. And
mm.
what does my team do? What does my team start to do? We got to get you a win. Got to get you out of here. Got to send you to a school and
Distract you. Um,
distract. Exactly. And you go to a school and you succeed, and what does that do for you? I am fucking invisible again. I did it. I achieved something. I am not worthless. I am not a piece of shit. I'm not going to look at this failure ever again. It's done. Write it off the books. Next deployment. Let's go.
Suppress more.
Next train up. Exactly.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
those wins feel so great.
Yeah.
And we acknowledge that. And it wasn't my team sergeant didn't care. It wasn't that my team sergeant wasn't a bad guy. But what do you think happened to him as a young enlisted soldier when he first got to a team and he endured a hardship or something happened at home? His mentorship did the same thing.
Yeah. Meant
Hey,
well.
man, exactly.
Meant well, but does that really help bring your true power back?
Yeah. And nobody knows to sit down and be like, hey, let's talk about this. What's going on? Let's dig through this, because the only thing that truly matters is the mission. That's the number one thing that matters. And you've got to go into that job knowing that. I will never sit here and advocate that we change that and never put the mission first. Um, but we got to focus on the human factor, and we're failing it. That's a soft imperative. Humans
Mm.
before hardware, and we're failing at that. But that wasn't a failure of my leadership as a young NCO and SF. That was a leader trying to do what he knew would get me back into the fight mentally. And it did. And I'm grateful for it, because if I would have stayed there and dealt with that divorce and dealt with that failure of not being a man that could put priority into his family, I don't know what it would have done.
Mhm.
And there's so much in the backside of that story, but ultimately, when you are a man that's dealing with so much and you don't face it, it's gonna ooze and mix into every aspect of your life. How can
That's
you love somebody else when you can't love yourself?
mm.
How can you gonna be a faithful and good husband when you can't even look to yourself in the mirror and take care of yourself? You're not. One of the
Yeah.
most important things I've learned in this whole journey is the value of your significant other.
Mm.
Like that is the if we truly want to be the best version of ourselves for our spouse, you got to take care of yourself for you, not for them. You got to go to those treatment centers for yourself. You got to go seek counseling for yourself. Make yourself better. And I didn't know that. So that was one of the first times where it was cemented in my mind that if I fail or I'm doing something in my personal life has fallen apart,
Mm.
you just go to a school, you go on a deployment and you feel better. Comfort, comfort over the discipline and discomfort of healing and taking care of things.
I
Um,
I hear that so often. I mean, just even, the somebody gets in a critical incident as law enforcement or
yeah.
dispatch, terrible call. I mean, that's usually because you guys are protectors too. You are, with some, like you said, you want to be what you did not have. You
Oh
become
yeah.
great protectors, right? But then when stuff surfaces or, it's like, okay, we got to get busy, train. Like I can totally imagine that because I see the pattern in so many stories. Um, Let me ask you something. Let's backtrack for a second.
Yeah.
For all those that are maybe interested in going into the military, or I mean, really, honestly, any protector arena. So the motivation is I want to protect people. I'm
Mhm.
going to go this good, noble route and protect people instead of go the negative route, right? You get in there, and thank you for that. Like you go that direction. What would you have done differently had somebody maybe planted seeds in you, like given you some possibilities? What can you imagine you could have done? And of course, I'm not saying this to shame you or anything. It's just, to help somebody listening if they're in that situation. If you could have done something in that moment, like maybe when you were in high school or senior year, or is there anything in hindsight that, you know what, I this would have been a good idea. I'm almost
Yeah.
afraid to even say, like, I don't, I would never want to shame anybody in, well, you could have done this because that's definitely not my intention at all, but it is just for learning. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, you know where I'm
No,
coming.
absolutely. I personally, and I know this now to my absolute core. I wouldn't go back and I wouldn't change anything. God has a plan. No matter how painful, no matter how difficult, we have to understand that there's a purpose for it.
Mm.
And when I talk to young men or anybody that's looking to get into the military, specifically, I always we try to champion going in the SOF, go to Ranger Regiment, go be a Navy SEAL, come off straight from if you're 21, go straight into selection, go to Special Forces,
Mm.
um, or go infantry. Take these big endeavors. It doesn't suit you to go into this half-hearted. And it's not to say that supply or any other MOS isn't relevant. I'm just saying for speak specifically due to young men. But what I do say about their journey, not trying to change anything in my journey, is I believe that there are three spheres that we have to truly focus on: mind, body, and spirit. And if you don't have that spiritual component, start working on it.
Mm.
I was really fortunate to have teammates in certain aspects that, whether I was a young guy and I had other team members, or even when I was a warrant officer, I saw young Green Berets in every aspect of my career. I was able to witness Green Berets that were true men of faith.
Mm.
And when I look back and I see the ones that didn't have or didn't go through the challenges and endeavors that I went through, they went through the same deployments. They went through the same horrible situations. They had setbacks physically. They got injured. They had all the same things. They experienced the same turmoil. But the key difference is they were rooted in their faith. They were rooted in the importance of their family. I wasn't. Or many of my friends at that in those younger periods in my career, they weren't either. A lot of them, like myself, are now. Like I said, I look back. I would never change anything. But if I can tell anybody to focus on one sphere before they come into the military, is that spiritual side. Understand what your faith is. Understand what place God rules in your life.
Mm.
It's important because we we really want to try to control everything. And I see guys that struggle with that. Doc, when he loses a casualty, he'll beat himself up because I should have been able to save him. I should have been able to do everything. It's outside of your control. A team sergeant or a detachment commander, if something goes wrong on a mission, they'll beat themselves up, and a warrant too. They'll carry that loss and they'll say that it's them. They'll say it's their fault. But the reality is, you don't have that control. Things happen.
Mm.
If you're not rooted in faith, if you don't have an understanding that you're not in control of every moment, you're going to struggle. It's such an important thing. And now more than ever, if you're going into the military, especially in the soft world, understand how powerful your faith needs to be, because it's going to be challenged. Q course is horrible. It's not easy walking the park, and it continues to evolve and change. Going to buds is going to be difficult and horrible. Going to ranger regiment is going to be incredibly difficult. But if you understand the importance of endurance, of enduring the hardships, if you understand the importance of faith and following your path, regardless of how difficult it is, you're going to succeed.
Mhm. Mhm.
I was blessed, and I didn't know it, that I had this ability to just go for broke, knowing what I'd been through. And I pushed through regardless of what I was facing. But a lot of people don't. And they'll quit, they'll give up right as they're like at the finish line.
Mhm.
But when your body and your mind tell you that it's too hard, you can't do it, you can always rely on faith.
Mhm. It's so powerful to hear your journey, Denny. It's so powerful. And I think there's a gold star mom, Holly Higgins. She's actually going to be another author. Her son Daniel J. Johnson was a senior airman who was killed by an IED like right before he left Afghanistan. And there was another. It's like an army, the Canadian Army. He went to just go say goodbye to somebody, and he was walking over.
Mm-hmm.
Happened to be the army guy's canine who sensed that there was an IED, but then they couldn't find it, but it ended up being what killed her son.
Mm.
And after 7 years of keeping this buried and then, having a hard time because, right, if we're not open with what's happening and we're suppressing those stories, the tear down begins. But she just reminded him, she goes, it's hard. It's hard. She was devastated. But she says, there is a scripture that says our days are numbered, that God
Yeah.
knows exactly when our day is. She said the right person came home.
Yeah.
And was able, again, because of the vulnerability factor that you're talking about, that helped promote your healing, your holistic healing, the courage to lean forward and take that journey of healing. That was an invitation for him to do that also after 7 years of terrible suffering, of suppressing what was eating him up inside. And I really appreciate you sharing that because there's so many things that faith helps, the stories that we tell ourselves, right? And when we
Yeah.
can have them align with how we're created, just the freedom and the open doors that can open for us to be able to start that healing process. So I really appreciate you sharing that because I think a lot of people needed to hear that too. The importance of embracing spirituality.
It is so important. And nowadays you can find, I mean, you can log on and within 5 seconds, you're going to have some sort of Instagram ad for a program to go to special forces, to go to selection, go to Navy SEAL selection. Everybody's out there with a fitness program. Everybody will tell you what you need to do to be successful physically. Nobody dives into the mental, the spiritual. You're not going to succeed if you don't even know yourself. The only reason why I succeed is because of brute sheer will. And it gets a lot of us through. But for a majority of the people out there, what you really need to be successful is knowing who you are and being a person of faith. I tell that to everybody. Fun fact, my nephew, um, when he graduated high school, he was looking to join the military. And because the prevalence of video games and uh, special operators in movies, the first thing he wanted to know is like, what do I need to do to become a Green Beret? And I'm like, you're not there yet. You're not there yet. You need to do is figure out who you are. Sit down with your parents. Now, I'm not going to say his name. Wouldn't want to embarrass him. but he was very much what you would call a knucklehead throughout high school. Um, Somebody that just couldn't trust, somebody that was constantly getting in trouble. And the reality was, if you can't be depended on, if you can't be the person that will choose the discomfort of being honest and taking your punishment, you probably don't belong in special forces. You probably don't belong in these careers where your word matters, your integrity matters. And when he was hoping for me to give him a train up, a workout plan, I told him, go get a job. Prove to somebody that you can be reliant, that you can show up and be on time.
Mm.
Go to community college. Figure out what you really want in life. Because I tell you, anybody that I know that's either a Green Beret, a Navy SEAL, a Ranger, or a MARSOC Raider, all of them that didn't go straight in the military after high school had the same awakening I did. What am I doing here? There is no value in this life. There is no value in doing this. There is a greater, higher calling. I wasn't made to sit here standing idly and just living paycheck to paycheck. There is something bigger happening in the world, and that's where I am being called to go. And a lot of people realize that. And those are the people that I know are more successful. The ones that try something else first and they realize they're not cut for this 9 to 5 life. They're not cut for this normal existence. And when he heard that from me, it was very much a moment of like, well, I'm not going to do that. So he enlisted anyways, but he didn't go special operations. I think he's an S1 clerk. So
I love though that point. Like basically you're saying you have to be a man of integrity, a woman of integrity to have this kind of responsibility because people's lives are on the line. And for you to go in and to really know who you are, it's not about the physical training and even just the mental training, right? It's really
mhm,
being grounded in integrity and which spiritually can give you that foundation. And I love that you bring that up. I really love the aspects that you're bringing up and being able to share it through story because it's
yeah,
we can definitely connect to that and as a human being. So
yeah,
anybody can connect to your story because you're sharing so vulnerably, and I really appreciate that.
yeah,
Um, so here we go through your journey, kind of discovering things. You had some hardships in your personal life, trying to stay busy with well-intentioned, advice, of course. And so then you start the transition, unless there's something else you want to cover, but maybe we
yeah.
can
So
transition.
yeah, the that was again, I think my entire recovery, I was trying to control everything. I wanted when I came back from my last deployment, everything started falling apart radically. And I didn't want to admit that I needed mental health support. I wanted help for pain because pain is tangible. Pain to me is the most important things to me at that point were physical metrics. If I can get back to running and doing the physical things that a Green Beret has to do to be a Green Beret, then that's it. That's all that matters. I can hide and cover up the cognitive issues.
Mm.
I couldn't remember how to get home. I would have panic attacks just driving to work and I would lose everything consistently. I couldn't read. I had to highlight everything line by line. Um,
Was that
and my,
because of breach, like the traumatic brain injuries?
yeah. So
Okay.
one thing that we don't do is we don't document every time we're unconscious, every time we get knocked out.
Mhm.
And that has a toll on your body. I didn't know anything about non-penetrative traumatic brain injuries. Brain injury to me, before I went through and had my consultation and my diagnosis with my neuropsychologist and the polytrauma treatment team, I thought brain injury was something that happened when you had actual like damage. You fractured your skull. There was actually like penetrative injuries in there. And that's the assumption we all have. And come to find out, after a career in special operations and multiple concussive uh, injuries, whether it's stack line injuries, because I was in the 82nd before I came to um, 7th group, multiple injuries on a drop zone that you just don't talk about. You woke up after being knocked out, running to your formation area. Uh,
Get knocked
then
out
there's all the
from
oh yeah,
land.
oh yeah, stack line jumps are the worst.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
especially in the 82nd when you're doing mass tack exits at 800 feet. You know, literally, you only have it's enough time for your chute to open fully. And then if it's at night, you're not really paying attention. And then you land, and the first thing that makes contact is your head slamming in the back. Um, and you
God.
have so many of those, but you don't say anything.
Oh,
And it doesn't do you any good to say anything because then you're going to be looked at as a malingerer. You don't want to be part of the training. So you learn really quick to not say anything about injuries.
mm,
Um, and then there's blast wave exposure. We have a term, well, I ate a wall charge, meaning you're too close. For every type of charge you make, there's a minimum safety factor, and you have to take that into account. But in combat, you can't take that into account.
mm,
You can't. One of the worst ones I ever experienced was in 2015, and we're literally blowing the back of a compound so we can get out of a situation where we're pinned into a building. And just in order to save us, my 18 Charlie at the time made a breaching charge that was way too big. And talk about not being aware, completely days out of it, and then you still have to function. You still have to
mm.
exit, clear the building, lay covering fire, and then run for cover. And as the 18 Bravo at that point, I'm running with a Mark 48 and I'm running, save my own life. And then you stop and realize that, man, I can't think straight. I don't even know where the fuck I'm at. What is going on?
Oh.
But you don't say anything about that. You get treated as like high five. You just had your first TBI. What are you talking about? Here, just you'll be fine.
So
Now, and that's
go
just
ahead.
one trip. That's just one trip. We're not talking about the train ups. We're not talking about the amount of exposure you get from shooting mortars
Mm,
and and then Carl Gustavs and then AT4s over and over and over again. And we tend to think, well, if something's wrong, I would know. I
mm,
would know. I would pay attention to it. Then you get to the point where you're 36 and you can't remember where you placed your wallet and your keys. You can't remember how to get to your house. You drive past your house, you get to Destin and realize like where was I going? What
mm,
was I doing? Then you ignore it because you don't want to say this to anybody. Like you're having issues that are very private in the bedroom and you have no one to talk about because you're not going to be vulnerable enough to bring this up to a doctor.
mm,
You don't say anything to anybody because the reality is, well, I'm still able to wake up.
mm,
But then things like your left eye doesn't focus.
mm,
Oh shit, that's pretty significant. Maybe I can hide this a little bit more. Maybe I can hide this a little bit more. That's where I was. My eye wouldn't focus anymore, and I was trying to hide it. I'm
mm,
having issues that, unbeknownst to me, are described now in a white paper study called operator syndrome. And the entire thing is a check, 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 check. And I don't know anything about this because nobody's talking about this. It wasn't until I started my own podcast and brought on the doctor, Dr. Chris Free, to come on the show to talk about it.
mm,
It wasn't until I go to a polytrauma treatment center and sit down with an entire care team And then you finally, and at that point, I've already been self-advocating for myself for almost a full year. So I show up with a full list of things that are going wrong. Hey, doc, here's everything. Absolutely everything I'm dealing with. And they're like, holy shit. When did you start talking about this? About a year ago. Like,
Wow.
I need help.
Wow.
A- And that's the importance of being able to self-advocate. The importance of like, do you really want to get better? Do you really want to get better? Then you have to be willing to go to those uncomfortable appointments with doctors and tell them everything that's going wrong with you.
Yeah.
Because the truth is, no one is coming. There isn't a team of doctors that are going to fly out and scan your brain and get all the things that you're hiding up in here and print it out. You're going to have to talk. You're going to have to divulge what's going on with you.
Just like you said, no one is coming. You have to think that way, being an advocate for yourself. Like if anybody walks away with anything from this, well, there's a few things definitely they need
Yeah.
to walk away from, but definitely you have to advocate for yourself, which takes courage to move forward, doesn't it? I
Yeah.
mean, you just have to have that mindset. But anybody who's watching this, you do have the courage. You
Yeah.
just have to know that you have to advocate for yourself so you can get what you need, what you deserve in this
Yeah.
job. Let
And
me
it
ask.
was,
Oh, go ahead.
sorry, it was really easy for me as I reflected back to like highlight the things that I did and kind of stumbled upon. Because there isn't, in special operations, you have a framework for every mission set that you have. Okay, we're gonna do a DA mission. I know everything I gotta do for that. We're gonna go do fit in this country. I know everything I gotta do for that. I know that every tracker, I know every single thing I have to submit to get this approved to go execute it. There's nothing like that for mental health,
Right.
but there was. I just had to understand and see the parallels. And it was a self recovery, personal recovery. SEER, survival, evasion, rescue, escape. Okay. What happens when someone's in an isolated environment? If a fighter pilot gets shot down, he's on the ground by himself. He's not going to just sit there and wait. I'm just going to wait here. If a Green Beret gets isolated in Afghanistan or any other country he's operating in, he's not going to just sit there and be like, okay, rescue me. No,
Mm,
your number one task is you got to take that rescue mission and you have to own it. You have do outs. You have things you got to do. You have an evasion plan of action. And that's when I understood that, okay, no other mission is comparable to mental health except for this. Because when you're going through anxiety, depression, PTSD, moral injury, and suffering from like chronic pain from years of abuse to your body, you feel like you're alone because you don't want to talk to anybody. You don't want to admit anything. So you're isolated, but
mm,
you got to take action. This is your life. You have to, it has to matter to you.
yeah. What a great
I
reframe.
I
Great.
sat there in front of a mental health professional for months, giving her little bits of truth,
Mm,
little bits of truth. The one time I was 100% vulnerable, and that's the first, SEER is a great acronym. And even though like the points that I use don't make a great acronym, but the first thing I needed to do is be vulnerable. When I sat in front of Michelle and I finally told her my truth, that I had a plan of action, that I was going to end my life, that's when it became an option to go somewhere that's specialized in soft professionals, in veterans, in the way that we think, because we need a different type of help. And that was going to Laurel Ridge Treatment Center. So vulnerability, that was the first thing. And that's when I was actually able to go somewhere to give away all this trauma that I was dealing with. That's the first time I talked to anybody about everything I lived with and went through. And then I came back from that program and I could have easily just gone right back to work. I could have easily just, oh, I'm good. No, self advocacy. I need help. I'm dealing with some more things. I'm dealing with a long list of issues that I can't ignore anymore. Finding out from amazing nurse practitioners that, hey, there's another treatment center that you can go to, but you have to ask for it. Let's go. Do I meet the requirements? Absolutely. Send me. I'm not going to give the rest of my life for this organization and become a vegetable that my wife has to take care of. I don't want that. I want to be able to be functional. If they can teach me how to do that, because that's a reality. Like, that's a reality. Are you going to sit here and allow the best years of your life and just suffer and deteriorate more till you have nothing to give? No. I want to heal and I want to start healing now. Where can I go? Who can help me? Who can answer why these things are still happening? Self advocacy. We can all do it. And then for me, the next one was courage. It takes a lot of fucking courage to walk into that doctor's office and say, "Hey, something's going on. Something's wrong in my body, and I don't know what the fuck it is. I need tests." And then having that courage to go into the unknown. Nobody wants to go to a treatment center, especially if it's a mental health treatment center. The stigma that comes with that. Courage is completely different in our mind. We think of courage as going into a firefight, going on a deployment, and risking your life. You're willing to do all that, but you're not willing to go into the unknown of a treatment center.
You left yourself behind, right? I mean, you wouldn't leave
Exactly.
anybody else behind, but
Exactly.
yeah.
And when you're doing housework, CQB, number one man always has to go to the unknown. Always. He's the one that can come in, get the right angles, clear everything else. There's no threats. What's the one thing he can't see? Oh, it's that corner. I can't see into that corner. He's got to bite that. He's got to go. And everybody at some point has been the one man has had to do that.
Mm.
You can do it. Go into the unknown. Go into the unknown, whether that's finally going to a therapist, finally going to a counselor, finally going to a mental health treatment center, finally asking for help. Go into the unknown. Stop fearing it. Stop fearing it. Go into the unknown. That's true courage. I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to be part of a statistic. I don't want to be part of a group that prides itself on its ignorance and stubbornness and not getting help. I don't want that to be my legacy to my future kids. That I was too proudful. That I wanted to wear this stupid badge of honor that says I'm disgruntled and I'm a dysfunctional individual. No, fuck that. I'm going to read Brene Brown. I'm going to read Dr. Kristen Neff. I'm going to read all these books that these great minds have put out there that break down how I can get better. I can be more emotionally intelligent. It takes guts to do that. It's not made. It wasn't made specifically for me. No, it wasn't. It was made for everybody. I don't have to put a label on it. Like I'm looking at right now, Dare to Lead. I'm looking at Atlas of the Heart. These are all books that before I had the courage to say, you know what, I need to seek out this knowledge, I would discount because, oh, that's not about combat. It's not about being a Green Beret. No, it's about being a human being. If you look for knowledge, if you're willing to go into the unknown and seek out information, that's the most friggin' Green Beret thing ever.
Mm.
We're the thinkers.
Mm.
We're unconventional. You're supposed to be looking for information from ulterior like sources. But I wasn't looking for that before. I wasn't looking for anything that would take me off of my pillar of being a Green Beret that knew it all. But no, I don't know it all. So I have to study. I have to understand. I have to be willing to dig into it. Be courageous enough to seek out knowledge, to be empowered by it. Because I didn't know this, but doctors don't have all the knowledge. Not every doctor is a master of every subject. I didn't know that. You just think that, oh, these doctors know everything. No.
Yeah, right. You have to advocate for yourself. Don't you think too, with everything, like it's amazing hearing all these tools that you have for the job and how you beautifully reframe it and how to advocate for yourself and getting all the information that you need, using all the tools that you have been so greatly trained in. But isn't it amazing that maybe it just takes one good conversation of transitioning your mindset into a different
Yeah.
mission, like the new mission, and
That's
that
it.
this is what it looks like, and it seems like that could actually that seed could be planted within, like, a half hour, just what you're doing right now,
Yeah.
and then once the warrior changes mindset, Like, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna treat this as, like, really a new Green Beret mission, and to not give up in getting all the intel that you need for your mission and getting
Yeah.
your people on the right and the left, and just making a decision you're not gonna leave yourself behind."
Yeah.
So, I've never been there, I'm just learning from all these guys, but
Yeah.
it's really cool to hear just the truth that you're putting out there. I mean, it's these truth bombs that it's like, if somebody really embraces this, then it just opens the door to healing.
It does.
That
And
more
the
that compass.
and it's oftentimes it can be, and I learned this the hard way. You can't force somebody to take this and run with it,
Yeah.
because I wasn't ready for this at one point. I had to find this out on my own. And when you try to bring this new information to somebody that's so dead set on not leaving that identity behind and picking up a new identity, oh, they're gonna react very hostile to it.
Mm,
You can't make somebody want to heal or get better.
yeah.
They got to come to it on their own. But if the mission is if the information's already there, it makes it easier. And I think the hardest one, the hardest one to talk to people about, especially men, is the final piece in my framework that helped me. It's like vulnerability, I can sell that. Can sell that. Um, being courageous, of course, you can reframe it so they can understand. And the same with um, self advocacy. Of course, I got to advocate for myself. But the last one's hard, and that's self compassion.
Ah,
Self compassion is
mm,
very hard because we do everything for the greater good of something else, and for somebody else. Every time I talk to somebody and sit down with a veteran and say, "Hey, man, you can go to a treatment center for yourself." No, no, I'm going to go do this for my wife. It's like, no, then you're not going to be successful. You got to do this to get so you love yourself, so you value yourself. When you're at 100%, then you're going to be the perfect person in that marriage, in that relationship. You got to be doing this for you. Two broken people don't make a good union. And when you're doing it for somebody else, like you're never gonna, it's never gonna have the right effect. You're never gonna go 100% in if you're telling yourself that I'm gonna do this for. Because I needed that too. I needed those words too because I went to that treatment center at first thinking I'm gonna do this for my wife. No, I'm not doing this for my wife. I'm doing this for me.
you have to
I need to
empower
have,
yourself, isn't it? I mean, that's the only way to keep being able to keep sustaining what
yeah,
needs to happen. It's empowering yourself that like, okay, I've got to do this for myself, and then and then
yeah.
my partner will benefit.
Well,
Uh,
and it also breeds resentment. I'm here for you. I'm doing this for you. I'm doing this for you. I'm going through all this stuff for you. How
uh,
dare you not pick up the phone when I call you? How
uh,
dare you not send me cards?
good point.
No, that
Right.
doesn't work.
Right.
You take care of you for the benefit of the marriage, and I'm going to take care of me for the benefit of the marriage. And we both look at that relationship of like, I'm going to work my ass off for me so that I can be that best person for our marriage.
Yeah.
It doesn't work the other way. It doesn't. There's so many examples of it. And when you're finally understanding and you finally see through it, you're like, oh shit, you're right. I was just a broken individual trying to pretend like I was ready for a relationship before, pretending that I was a good husband. No, if I can't look myself in the mirror, how am I going to be able to perform my duties as a husband? I'm just faking it. No, it doesn't work.
It's like you said too, if you do it for somebody else, or if it puts all the pressure on the other person to be a perfect
Yeah.
person, because then when they fail being perfect, right?
Yep.
Just like you said, the resentment comes in, and then that's there we are. We're back to square one again.
Yeah.
Um, but that empowering yourself by doing it for yourself, owning that journey.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's that self compassion, and it's not woo woo. It's science based. There's a real science to it. Comparing self-compassion to self-esteem. I use self-esteem throughout my entire life. I could when I could forge a little bit of it, it's like, oh, it's so empowering. I played sports as a kid. Like, oh man, I did good. Did good at this track meet. That felt great. Man, what happens when you don't do great? I know what it felt like to have to like face the fact that I sucked at the sport and now I'm going back to abusive environment. Man, no aspect of my life is good. This sucks. Highs and lows constantly.
All on your performance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Self-compassion says, hey, it's okay. Denny, you're not going to continue being a Green Beret in the form of an active Green Beret. But you earned that. You earned that. That was something that you earned. It was never given. You earned that. And look back on your creed, dude. You're going to live to succeed again. It's okay.
Yeah. There's a
This
lot of
doesn't feel
healing.
good. Yeah, and self-compassion is something that talks to you in a different way. Hey, this sucks. But guess what? You're going to be okay. It's that narrative in your mind that's not just like, oh man, you're fucking amazing. You're great. Look how amazing you are. But then when you're met with defeat, it's fleeting. It's not there anymore. And it gives way to that internal critic. Self-compassion combats that by saying, like, hey, combining three components: mindfulness, kindness, and common humanity. We can sit down and say, what really sucks about this? I'm scared. I'm leaving this life that I knew. It's the only thing I've known for such a long time. So I know, I observe it. I know it now. Okay. That's what I'm really feeling. I'm walking away from something that has become my entire world. Okay. I'm not the only person that's gone through this transition. Oh shit. Common humanity. I'm not the only Green Beret that's ever been through this. I will be okay. Others have succeeded. Others have gone through this and I've succeeded. And that last bit of kindness, dude, look how far you've come. Holy shit. Yeah. I'm okay walking away. I'm okay putting my family and my health first. I'm going to be fine. And that little example, that's self-compassion. It's actually a self-compassion break exercise you can do at home. It's literally putting three things that Dr. Kristen Neff put together through her work on self-compassion. It's understanding, bringing the awareness, that mindfulness piece of what you're actually going through. Because for a long time, like, you're just angry, you're just bitter, but you're not naming what's really underneath all that. And then you understand that you're not the only person that's ever gone through this, that there's a common humanity aspect to this. When your suffering is linked to so many other people, so many other veterans who've gone through this, and then you realize, hey, they've succeeded, why not you? Self-compassion is a hard thing to sell, but dude, when you see it and you feel it and you understand the importance of it, you just want to share with everybody. Because after not being able to look myself in the mirror for a vast majority of my life, and being able to look myself in a recording right now and look myself in a mirror every morning I wake up, that's a whole different life. That's a whole different chapter that I want everybody to experience. If you can just experience one bit of good in your life, everybody should be able to look themselves in the mirror and see themselves for the amazing human being that they are.
Yeah, that's right. It just, it really opens the door to, I love what you're saying. And I'm so glad that you brought this up. And I'm so happy for you too, by the way. I love seeing people just kind of blossom in really healing. And I
Yeah.
just think too, just your ability to have self-compassion and the healing that goes with that, we are meant to be able to connect. And when we have self-compassion, we have empathy for other people.
Yeah.
And then there's connection and just it creates like I can't imagine living without that because it's so rich no matter what happens in your performance in or whatever goes on, which can be hard, if
Yeah.
you are connected with empathy with people who kind of understand, and it's a really wonderful world to be in, you know.
Yeah.
And it gives you the freedom to not be perfect. It gives you the freedom to remember that we're all in this messy life together. The journey really is messy.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, so yeah, I've been there too. Yeah, me too. And but it really allows so much freedom to be able to heal and to move forward. And I just hear that so much in your story. I have just loved hearing how you've kinda gone through the transition process too, and all the it's like you have this whole energy in you, like, "Why not me? Like, I
Yeah.
can do that. I can something so different from, your life as a Green Beret." I'm like, "I can do that." I just love that. It's so inspiring, Denny.
Well, I think one thing we lose sight of when we transition out of the military is how unique and how small of a demographic we really are.
Mm,
Like, it's not just a simple graduate. It's not just a simple course. It's not just a simple job. It's a profession. And we don't look at it as being unique anymore because that's all we've known.
mm,
But if you go back and you look at it, how many people were in your selection class? Okay, out of those individuals, how many people got selected? Okay. Now, out of those individuals, how many graduated the Q course? Now, sadly, out of those individuals that graduated and made it to the ultimate dream, made it to their detachment, how many survived?
mm,
How many made it? And then how many continued? How many of you and your peers made it through to sergeant first class, became master sergeant, became team sergeant, became a warrant officer? How many continue to achieve and continue to go and continue to go? It's not an easy thing. It's not an easy profession. Same with Navy SEALs, same with MARSOC Raiders. And when you continue to pull back the layer and continue to look at the attrition rates and the people that didn't make it, and continue and continue and continue, you're part of a very elite small percentage. Now you leave the military. Where do you go? It doesn't serve you to seek a life of comfort and ease. It doesn't serve you to go into a job or profession that never challenges you again. It doesn't serve you to stay quiet idly while your nation suffers and goes through turmoil.
mm.
That's why we're seeing so many other professionals running for office, getting involved, developing nonprofits, taking initiative and action to make a difference in people's lives. You were part of something that few people could ever do. Even fewer would even fathom to try. So why would you get out and not try to achieve something great again, something that seems impossible?
Yeah.
And here's the beauty of it. Don't tell anybody. Just go out there, formulate your plan and go for it. Just go after the wildest dream imaginable. And if that's starting off your own agricultural business, awesome. If that's being a police officer and firefighter, that's awesome. If it's being a public speaker and activist, great. But whatever it is, make sure it's challenging and freaking it feels impossible because that's where we thrive. We don't thrive in the easy. No one ever submitted a con op for an easy mission. Like that's a crazy thing. No one ever submitted an operation that's like, yeah, we're just gonna go out here and just hang out. No, you're always looking for a challenge. You're always looking to make an impact in your AOR. So make an impact in where you live, make an impact in your country. Do something great. Be willing to do it. I think in a shameless plug to the Honor Foundation, it's the only place I ever found that actually sat down and said, like, what do you really want to do? What do you find purpose and passion with?
Mm,
And
right.
it's like, you're asking me what my passion is? Like, okay, like I'm kind of scared to say this, but man, this is what I really want to do. It's like, okay, well then do it. Go out there and fucking do it. Like, I get it. It's scary when you have a wife and kids and you got to put food on the table, but you can do it. You've done it before. You've succeeded before. You're going to succeed again. Be willing to do the impossible. And that's why I tell every single veteran that I meet, it's not easy to go back to school in your late 30s. It's not. But is it worth it? If you have a high, like, if your dream is to achieve something that few people dare to dream, then yeah, it is. And I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to do the impossible, not just because I want to be of service to others, but because it's fucking there. If others can do it, why not you?
Yeah.
If others can do it and others can achieve it, why not you? You've already proven that you're different. You're cut from a different cloth. And that's not to take anything away from any other service member, but I'm speaking to the soft professional that's out there dealing with ambivalence as to where to go next. Look for the hardest thing that you could ever possibly imagine yourself succeeding and accomplishing, and go after it. And
Yeah.
that's where I found
Mm.
a lot of my satisfaction, is putting together those plans and going after something that at least for me, I feel it is hard to achieve. But if there's a way, where there's a will, there's a way. So that's my final thing to any of you out there that are struggling with what to do with your next chapter. Find the hardest fucking thing that's out there that you could possibly ever want to achieve, and do it.
Yeah. I have so many thoughts, but that almost seems like a good ending place. It just that was so wrapped up so beautifully. So what I heard from this talk, I heard, the grit and the suffering that you went through as a child, it helped your performance. Like, it
Yeah.
helped you, like, "This is not so hard, I've already been through this, and this actually has an end in the training," whereas when you were a child, you
Yeah.
did not think there was going to be an end in your child. You had no idea what was coming. So you had to survive. So you got that training of survival. You just, right? One day after the
Yeah.
next. But even knowing that at least as a Green Beret, the training did have an ending date. And then you move on and realize, okay, there's stuff going on that is not willing to be suppressed anymore. So again, you have that fork in the road. Am I just going to completely self-medicate and just keep trying to find every way to suppress it? Or am I going to have the courage and figure this out? And have like SEER school, right?
Yeah.
Your acronym, and so you step forward in courage, and you listed so many things, but really just compacted in, sandwiched in self-compassion,
Yeah.
to really remember who you are behind and under that Green Beret. That is you who made that Green Beret. It was who you are, and that can be transferred to something else in life too, right?
Absolutely.
Everything that you had, who you are is what made you a great Green Beret, and now you get to heal too. You just need courage, self-compassion, and all the tools that you learn as a Green Beret. It seems like you're so equipped to have the best mental health on the planet, except for
Well,
the horse. Go ahead.
yeah, and it's a journey too, right? It's not, and I know a lot of us that are out there, if you're actively going through something and you haven't gotten help, or at least been a full willing participant in your own journey and actually doing the work, you're still searching for a magic wand. You're still searching for a magic pill that's going to make it better. And the reality is, it it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. You have to be willing to do the work. And that's ultimately the beauty of it too, though. You have the tools, you have the resources. I wanted to think a pill was going to be the end of it all. And then I was given so many damn medications that I was just numb, that I was just existing. And the beauty of doing the work, you realize the things that you need in life, the things that matter. Uh, for me, it's simple: purpose, passion, and mission. sticking to my health,
Mm,
sticking to the protocols that I've been able to develop with doctors and therapists, and understanding and being able to put a finger on the pulse of when things are going south for me.
mm,
Oh man, this is a rough time. Things that work for me may not work for you. I'm a big advocate of everything. Be willing to ask questions and try them, but don't be scared to say, "Hey, I don't want to try this anymore. I'd like to try something else." Um, I I am happy to discuss this with anybody. If you have any questions about what works for me, please reach out to me. Send me an email, sechaltpodcast@gmail.com. I'll tell you all the things that worked for me, but understand it may not work for you. But the best thing I can recommend is be willing to ask for help.
mm.
If you haven't done so, be willing to ask for help. That's the first thing you need to get on your journey because it is a journey. Nothing you do is going to just magically cure it all. It's you have to work through it. Um, and I am blessed to have that understanding. And I'm blessed to have the tools that work for me and the things that I need in my life. Because once you have all those tools and you build that healthy framework of what keeps you on the straight and narrow, it's harder to fall off path, but you still can. I veer, but I have things that I tap into on a daily basis that help me course correct and get back.
You brought up one little thing too that I want to hop on. So much great golden nuggets here. For anybody who goes and even seeks some help of a therapist, if you don't like them, if they just do not click with you, just leave.
Yeah.
You not
Yes.
you do not have to stay with somebody. Think about like if you're dating, you decide, I'd love to get married, so I need to go date. You would not
Yeah.
marry the first person
Yeah.
you meet, right? I mean, especially if you don't like them, right?
Yeah. I've got like the biggest horror story. I don't want to eat up any more time, but man, I had one of those where I remember like, did this woman really just say what she just said to me? I'm like, I'm never going back. And I did it. It was a very clear line that was very, I'm like, okay. And luckily for me, it was, this happened just a few months back. And I was willing to say, you know what? No, this doesn't feel right. And for that, I'm out. But I mean, years ago when I was first starting this journey, maybe I would have sat there and continued going. I'm like, yeah, yeah, but it's different now. I know that it's routine maintenance versus complete overhaul. So I don't go in for a complete overhaul. Like I've got things, but it's okay to have a counselor. It's okay to have a therapist. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you sit down, you make that plan of action. Once you make that plan of action and you understand when you're like, hey, we've met all the requirements, we've met all the things that came here to talk about, we've done X amount of sessions, I'm good to back on my own. And that's something that I share with people all the time. It's like, oh, do you go back to therapy? Yeah, if I need it. If I don't, then I don't. And it's okay to see somebody and talk to somebody. There's nothing wrong with it. You got to get over that. It's okay. You don't have all the answers. And a lot of times we think that we can share everything with our wives or our partners. I'll tell you right now, I love my wife, but we've had those talks and it's like, hey, she came from a very different world than I come from. The things that I've seen and I've experienced, she has no frame of reference. So it's difficult when you have those moments of like, oh man, like this came back into my memory. This came back. And your partner may not be able to talk about combat trauma. They may not be able to talk about those painful things. Don't get mad at them. Understand that it's okay that you can go talk to somebody else.
Yeah, good point. Very good point. Well, Denny, I just want to thank you so much. The talk was so rich. You've gone through so much in your journey, and you've been so generous in articulating it so that other people can have a chance to heal, won't have to suffer so long. So thank you so much. I really
No,
appreciate.
thank you. I definitely appreciate it. Sorry if we went over time. It's a long journey. So,
Oh, no, I could have talked much longer, honestly. I think you've just been fascinating. Can you tell us again, how can people connect with you if they
absolutely. Yeah. I'm on LinkedIn. So if you just want to reach out there, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn, Denny Caballero, Deny. Crazy. It's pronounced Denny, not deny. Last name Caballero, Caballero. Or hit me up on my email at sechalt. So SECHALT podcast at gmail.com. Always available there. Send me anything or reach out on my social media. Security Halt podcast on Instagram, and then the Retired Chief on TikTok, and I think everything else Security Halt podcast you can get on. And honestly, please, I literally will reply. You'll not get a spam bot. It's always me. So if you have any questions or just want to bounce, also Thursday nights I do my free peer-to-peer support veteran first responder group. So if you just want to vent, talk, or ask for resources within your area, give me a shout. It's one of the things that I love to do, because when I was struggling trying to find help, one thing that I didn't want to do was actually sit down in front of a computer and Google things, because I didn't want to admit that I needed help. And one thing that we are great at in this peer-to-peer support group is we're able to sit down with somebody and just be a Rolodex of information and just a positive voice in a world full of negativity. And it's hard as a veteran, because a lot of the things that we seek out end up just being a validating echo chamber of negativity. And what we can really, the best thing we can do for ourselves is just surround ourselves with good people. So if you're alone, reach out to us. Yeah, always there for you.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, and that will all be in the description too. So we'll have a 2 shots at that. Denny, you're awesome. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Sarah. I really appreciate it.